Good evening. This is the Monday, April 24th, 2023 meeting of the Finance Committee. It is 7 o'clock or close thereto, and we are officially opening the meeting. We have a quorum, so with that, we'll begin the review of our agenda, which I believe is up on on the screen. I keep calling it the board, which it is a board, but it's a screen as well. Last week, we did not have a quorum, and we could not review the minutes of the meeting of April 12th, which I believe I've sent to everyone. So if the group is prepared to discuss and approve those minutes, I'm happy to open it up for discussion or a motion.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the 4/12/2023 meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. The motion passes. So with that, we would embark on what we've all tried our best to make this be our last meeting, and there's the end zone and the red zone. I think we're clearly in the red zone portion of this, near the end zone, but we may not quite push it in this evening. Perhaps I'm mistaken, and perhaps we will. But I have circulated to everyone a kind of a budget worksheet. Also was smart enough to send it to Jeremy, who's good enough, I think, to maybe load it up on the screen. What I have noticed in the last 3 or 4 weeks, something that I've always kind of sensed and felt a little bit, but it's been resoundingly shared with me recently, is people are watching these meetings. So much so that one watcher said, you keep reviewing the same stuff. So with that critic in mind, let me review the same stuff to let you know where we are. And there happens to be 2 pages. Jeremy's not going to show the second one just now, but those of you that have a handout see that there are 2 pages. We all started, and we all remember, not so long ago, that we had a deficit of $444,000. I'll round a little bit just to make the point. Fortunately, with some transition and some other matters, the local revenue was initially miscalculated and fortuitously added to our particular budget, and therefore reduced the amount of the deficit. Then the town administrator met with department heads, and either some particular budget cuts were volunteered or others were made, but nevertheless, there was a big, healthy 6-figure number of $108,000. That left us on April 12th with a budget deficit of $221,000, already cut in half over a 2-week period of time. And on the particular meeting of April 12th, we spoke of a number of other things. Heather, this is politely observed and with no other agenda, but at that meeting, the town administrator was not here. But she did listen to the meeting and was with us last Wednesday on April 19th, and these are a series of all manner of types of impacts on the budget. In some cases, the first 2 items were add-backs to the budget, which basically increased our deficit. The fire chief was with us on April 12th and was good enough and kind enough to agree to increase the ambulance funding by $50,000. And then last week, the town administrator made a series of budget corrections, suggestions, cuts, and the like And all of those are detailed for you in this particular schedule right here, starting with town employee insurance all the way down to state aid. The 800-pound gorilla of which was the particular change to the employee town insurance. So the overall net impact of all of those, which I'm not sure we need to take a vote on, but if you wish we can, brought us to a budget deficit this evening at the end of last Wednesday's meeting at $125,000, with hopefully a zero somewhere in near sight. So that's kind of a recap of where we are. On the next page, which I'm going to take full and total responsibility for, but I also want to be very candid with regards to this, is that you'll see the first three items. With those particular calculations, we determined that the Finance Committee's budget deficit was as $125,348. Last week, the town administrator presented a number of items, including a memorandum with all manner of changes that appeared on the previous page, and her budget deficit was 143. I would submit to you that there's a little bit of cleanup. Somebody might say, oh my God, that big a number, but I would also submit to you on a $15 million budget, that doesn't even deserve a decimal point, number one. And number two, we have 52 cost centers, some of which have consolidated, other of which have broken out. And we have, in speaking with the town administrator today, she and I will get down to work to resolve that, which I think will be easily resolved. We just need to bring, and pardon the expression, hers and ours together. What I've done, though, is conservatively, is I don't want to sit here and suggest, well, let's balance the budget at 125 and find out that the real deficit is 143. So I'm starting this evening with worst possible case that our deficit is $143,000. And the remainder of this particular schedule is all manner of things to talk about, to discuss, to see whether or not any of those or any combination of those can lead us to a balanced budget. And you can see here there are, at least with the solid squares, I don't want to say bullets, we have talked now for 3 or 4 weeks about the elimination of elected committee stipends. And at one particular time, we unfairly listed just the select board. And the suggestion was, well, that's not fair, so you should list all of them that are subject to that particular stipend benefit, and that's what we've done here. And now we have, I don't want to focus just on that, but let me stop and focus just on that. Now we have a deliberation as to whether or not we want to do that, whether or not we should do that, or I'll go a step further, whether or not we can do that. And the reason I add can is as recent as 6 minutes past 6 this evening, I got an email indicating that the Board of Registrars committee stipend cannot, by Mass General Law, cannot be eliminated. So then the point becomes, if we can't do that, then that leaves 3, and how fair is that? So what do we do? And just as a matter of discussion, and I don't want to be the only one discussing it, the other side of the coin is, well, what about the Capital Improvement Planning Committee and the Zoning Board of Appeals and Conservation Commission and Planning Committee and Finance Committee? Shouldn't they receive a stipend? So maybe the fairness is not to cut any of those, but look to ways where you can offer those to the committees that don't get it. So it's a hot mess in terms of what we want to do, but I am not advocating, nor is anybody asking, and nor would most of us around the room accept. We're not looking for stipends. We're just letting everybody know the complexity of this particular issue, which is $13,000, which is not going to get us to a balanced budget singularly if we were to do all of it. And I just mentioned a minute ago, 1,700 of it, of which apparently we cannot do. We also had some fun frolic at our last meeting about the the copier and the select board budget, whether it was going to be purchased or leased, or this is a year, and I think it was basically agreed that we would continue to extend the lease, expand the lease, but lease it and not purchase the copier, and therein lies $2,500. And then another item that has been bantied around at a meeting here or there is whether or not the recreation director's salary, because we have a recreation department, and we have one item in that particular department, which is the recreation director salary, whether or not consideration should be made to move that to the revolving fund. And everyone here knows that that got a lot of attention, our attention, over about a 9-month period in terms of what's in that revolving fund. A request was made to increase the expenditure level for it. We happily went along and did that, but the question is, what is going on in that particular fund? And I see Jeff is here this evening. About a month ago, made a presentation, and the presentation was thorough, transparent, revealing that there were 25 certain events that traveled through, at least 25, that traveled through that particular revolving fund. We got the answer that we wanted, but now the question is raised, hope I say this right, if all the revenue is in the revolving fund, shouldn't all the expenses be in the revolving fund? And right now, we have the revenue in the revolving fund and the expense in our general fund. It's not an agenda position I'm taking, I'm just trying to put all of the particular sides of the issue out there. You'll see that if we happen to go forward with all of those, that would be 47,000 and some change, which would still leave us with a $95,000 budget deficit, which leads us down to the bottom of the page. We're going to need some help, perhaps with opera funds, perhaps from our own stabilization fund, and whether or not the Wachusett Regional School District, with putting forward all their reports and getting their free cash certified, if we're ever going to see any excess deficiency or some type of assessment adjustment come forward. I put TBD, to be determined, and the to be determined could be a number and it could be zero. So with all of that, that's our charge here this evening, to try to walk out of here with a zero somewhere on that page. And what we have consistently done, and I think we all by consensus have agreed, the dreaded override is our last resort, but it's on the particular page here, in full disclosure that we've considered everything. Not the least of which is on the preface or this disclaimer at this first particular page. If you could go back, Jeremy, all the way to the beginning. We tried to disclaim here by saying nothing is immune from being looked at, no hurt feelings, no agendas, no bias, no prejudice. We're looking at everything. And I've been on this finance committee for a lot of years, and I would submit to you, I don't think we've ever been quite as thorough in terms of our process to try to think about, talk about, show, reveal, hear back, and learn. I probably have learned more as a finance committee this year than I've learned in many of the other years that I've been on the committee. But that's the charge in front of us this evening, to make decisions on those and to get to zero or to otherwise punt. So that's the backdrop. So I think first page has already been taken care of, It's really the second page in terms of what, if anything, do we want to do or not do. And I don't want to get ahead of the Finance Committee, but there are representatives from the Assessors Board here this evening. There's representatives from Recreation here. At appropriate time, I hope you'd welcome their comments if they want to make any to help participate in this process, but that's what we're up against. I mean, we could basically say, in the third item down here, 143, let's hit the stabilization fund for $145,000 and call it a day. I mean, that would be the easy way out. Keeping in mind that we're currently at 441,000, so hitting it for 143 is going to get it down to 300,000 or slightly below. So that's where we're at. And with that, I'd open it up for any thoughts and ideas or comments or whatever. That's where we're at. So would the Finance Committee allow me to recognize the public? Jeff, go right ahead. Sure.
Thanks for hearing me. I just want to scope, I fully empathize with everything that you guys have done to be able to get to this point. I've been through budget cuts through my professional career, and it's never a fun thing. But I just want to make sure that if with the consideration of the cuts to the recreation and moving it over to the recreation revolving fund, I just want to make sure that everyone was aware. Yes, it is a fairly sizable number in our revolving account, about $150,000 right now. However, given the structure and our responsibilities of Recreation Commission, we have expenditures that are atypical, and the reason that they are is because, yes, the library has the actual single facility, but we have multiple sub-facilities that we have to manage and maintain. Given just this year, we just received approval to install a well at center fields to help out Paxton Little League, because if they were liable for that, their ongoing operations would likely be difficult for them to continue. So with that spend is a $20,000 spend. The Klingley and Wentworth and the bandstand roofs both need to get replaced. That's $8,000, $9,000, and over $10,000 respectively. The Wentworth bathroom, it has only one working facility for summer camp. That needs to get worked on. That's going to be about a $5,000 bill. Given with that, including the town's portion of Kathy's salary that's paid, that's an aggregate for 1 year's total of $91,000. So that takes their $150,000 and knocks it down to a third of that. Now, going forward with that, if the expectation of recreation to pick up that additional cost, long term, to me, there's two choices. Short term, we will be able to survive, to be able to sustain our facilities. But again, there's other facility costs that go with that everyone has been privy to through our budget that we shared with the Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago. There's field maintenance costs, things like that, and those numbers add up also. And so with that given, we can either ratchet back all of the programs that we lose money on. Those programs are summer concerts, the tree lighting, Paxton Day, movie night for the families, bingo, the Easter Bunny. We lose money on all of that. That comes directly out of the revolving fund. We receive no revenue from that. And on top of that, we have the other programs too that we offer to the community that are very important to a lot of people, like Zumba, yoga, the music program for the kids, and the mini sports for the kids. The school has recently requested us to assist in funding for new basketball backboards at the school. That's not going to be able to be continued also. And the additional burden of again, given dropping our overall income or our overall revolving fund down to $50,000-$60,000 this year, we won't be able to sustain the $31,000 of Kathy's portion of their salary going forward. That's what I have to say. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Jeff, when did we, because I don't remember, when did we go into having a revolving fund for recreation? Do you know?
Longer than I've been here, and I'm going into my third term.
So it's taken many years to get up to that?
Correct. It's not something where we've had a windfall of cash for whatever reason. Yes, we just recently started, just after COVID, the before and after school program, and that has added a little bit of increase in revenue. But there's a director, there is 3 or 4 staff on board too. So, I mean, we only increase the revolving account balance by maybe a couple $1,000s every year.
Okay, and Kathy's salary, is that the 31,000?
That's salary and insurance. And and just for the record.
That 31,259 is
Yeah.
salary and insurance?
Yeah, and that's actually a portion of Kathy's salary. Prior to this, the town paid all of Kathy's insurance. This year, we agreed to pick up the reciprocal portion of her insurance relative to the amount of salary that we paid for Kathy, which is about a third. So we pick up a third of insurance and salary already for Kathy.
Thank you.
Yep, yeah.
So if I understood correctly, so there's $91,000 approximately worth of projects?
Spend, yeah.
Yeah. Are those, I mean, I think in a year like this, if you look at those projects on a case-by-case basis, how many of them are do or die? Like, can they be pushed off till next year? You know, things like that. Nobody wants to do that, but those might, to me, like, canceling a program might be more detrimental down the road than moving a project, unless, if the bandstand's gonna fall down, obviously. It needs to be done.
The bandstand is questionable right now. We haven't had a professional service look at it.
Yep.
Klingler and Wentworth Fields had tarp put on them this past year, over the winter, and the tarps have been ripped off. And the reason that the Wentworth buildings, I think, is a little square footage smaller than Klingler, but because it's in such disrepair, it has holes in the roof. We keep equipment in there, again, there's the bathroom there for the kids. That's, both of those are, again, Klingler has bathrooms in there also, and those are immediate needs.
Okay.
So I think, Jeff, a couple of comments I have. For those that may not be familiar with the revolving fund, it's not some little slush fund. This is in full accordance with Mass General Law. And we went through this drill when we were trying to increase the 120 to
Yeah.
200,000. That's point one. Point two is, none of us want to sit here and have to have a hidden result that you have to cut 11 of those 25 programs that may not be making money, but they're part of the community fabric by having them.
Exactly.
Number three is that you came to the CIPC committee just the other night to talk about a well, which we had no money to fund, and you said you're gonna take it out of the revolving fund.
Yeah.
And immediately it passed at that particular committee. And you went on to say, I'll be back next year with a couple of others.
Yep.
So that's that side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, it either comes out of your revolving fund or it comes out of our stabilization fund. Neither of which are popular end results.
Sure.
That's- And you, in your introductory remarks, said, this isn't fun, this isn't easy. Point well made.
Yep.
And all of your points were well made. So I don't know that we have an answer, but at least we have good information from both sides.
Yep, that's my only goal, is clarity.
Yep.
Well, I think the Recreation Department has done a great job of keeping their finances in check and should be complimented about that. And I don't think that, you want to penalize them by, now saying, well, we're going to take Kathy's salary out of that, when the intention was for the Recreation Department to continue to improve and keep up the facilities of the recreation.
Yeah, that's my only goal. I moved to town 7 years ago, and within a year, I looked around, I love the community, and I wanted to help make it better. And, I think myself and the other chair commissioners and Kathy have done that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy?
Dee, if we could cut the assessor's stipend, we wouldn't even be having this conversation about recreation. Carol?
Jeff, you said about the revolving fund, that's been around as long as I've been around as well, which is over 21 years.
Yeah.
And I know that in the past, the Recreation Commission wanted to do certain projects, but they put them off. And then you came along and you started doing some projects. The projects that you took on wouldn't have been funded by the town, so they were taken out of the revolving fund. Also, the budget previously included supplies and purchase services. You no longer got those.
Correct.
items in there.
That got removed like
All your-
3-4 years ago, I believe.
Correct. So all you're taking out of there is a portion of the recreation director's salary.
Yes.
I think, I don't want to penalise recreation any further, really, because they've done everything they've been told to do. So,
I think, I hate when people use the word penal, I don't think anybody's trying to penalize recreation, or, I think Kathy raised my kids more than I did, so. Everybody loves recreation, but I think
Yeah,
nobody foresaw COVID, nobody foresaw
No.
everything that's going on, and I think, I think we can't, I don't know, I didn't grow up in a town like this, I love living here, I think it's awesome, but, I mean, you know, you can't expand every year over year, when the income, there's gonna be times we do have to cut things, and we do have, nobody wants to go backwards, but I just hope everybody gets it's awkward to vote on anything police, fire, you know, recreation, all these great things, but it's gotta come from somewhere, and it's definitely not meant to penalize Kathy or recreation or Jeff or anyone. You guys do a ridiculously phenomenal job, so I just hope nobody thinks it's meant
yeah, I'll retract that.
to be
I-
I don't know what's the
negative.
right word to use.
I just want to level set too, so two different things. So in the spirit of this discussion that we're having now, earlier this year, Kathy and I met with Heather, and Heather made the suggestion that we pick up the portion of Kathy's health insurance, commensurate with the percentage of her portion of the salary. Prior to this year, because I knew that there was going to be budget problems this year, it's pretty plain to see. So in that spirit, I've already agreed to voluntarily to pick up that portion of her health insurance too.
I have just one question about the well.
Yep.
Is this the year to do the well? Is there something driving? I mean, I know I wrote the water bill check for the Little League for longer than I can remember. And I know that it's a cost to the league for sure, but I don't think it's, I mean, you're talking 20,000 to put a well in. Is the league telling you that they can no longer afford to pay the water bill for that field?
So the speech that I gave to Mark and the capital improvements and the water commission is that if the water bill, my planning and motivation on this isn't short-term, okay, it's long-term. And so there's two different perspectives also. The first and most driving perspective is that Paxton Youth Soccer has never paid for water because they have the Assabumkett pond right there,
Sure.
and they have their own well. So Paxton Little League is incurring an expense that they in the spirit of fairness, they shouldn't be incurring. As custodians of those facilities, we should be ensuring that both leagues have the same treatment. And so with that, it's our view that Paxton Little League shouldn't be paying for water. So with that, and we've made the statement in our Recreation Commission meetings that Paxton Little League won't be paying for water this year. We're going to have to pick up that to have commensurate treatment. With that said, speaking long term, if we're paying $7,000 for a year for water, and the well costs us $20,000, that's a 4-year repay, and then it's scot-free other than small maintenance. So yes, we have two choices, right? We either pay the $7,000 and then pay $20,000 or plus more, depending on what inflation does next year, or we pay the $20,000 and then look to the horizon 4 years.
Their water bill's up to $7,000.
That's what it was last year. I think it was $7,500. And it's obviously weather dependent too, right? If we get a deluge of rain, it's going to be a lot less.
It's weather dependent, and it's dependent on, maintaining it and having someone keep an eye on how much they're running the sprinklers. That,
Well, and with that.
you can plow
with-
through a lot of water in that field if you're watering it every day.
With our assumption of the responsibility of,
Right.
of paying that bill, Travis and the DPW are now managing that solely.
Because I've had some drought years in that field, and I was thinking $3,000 tops.
Yeah.
So again, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be equal, and it should, I think it's great that rec wants to pick up the water. Just is this the year that we've got to decide to do it?
Yeah.
They had two more than I won't say anything else, I promise. I never talk this much. The, Paxton Little
Make
League.
sure you
and-
put it in the minutes.
Yeah, I know, I don't put myself in it, it's embarrassing. But, Paxton Little League, and I don't mean this to be in general, like, is Paxton Little League solvent? Are they gonna be around 3 years from now? Is it a lot? I feel bad, we lost softball 5 years ago, the numbers have really dwindled. Is it something we make an investment in? Is it even gonna be here? And I hate to say that, you know, I love baseball.
Well, I think you're gonna have to water the field regardless of whether there's a field playing there or not, really.
Okay.
I mean, you can't let it go. The way that field
But
is
it'd be a lot
designed
less.
and the way that field drains, it dries out extremely fast.
Okay.
And just to that question too, though, past 2 years, the baseball field in the back of center fields has gone into a fair amount of disrepair because of the lack of use. You know, if you don't run on it, the weeds start growing.
Right.
And I've spoken to Paxton Little League, and they've had a bump in their numbers, and so now they're going to be able
It's
to
gone back
use that
up?
back. Yeah, they're going to be able
Okay.
to start using that back field now, and they actually just got an agreement from a contractor to go in, pull up the top half inch of stone dust, and lay a new layer of stone dust to be able to bring that field back where it needs to be.
My last question of all these things, have there been, or is there room for fee increases that
Just gonna say that.
There are, but it's not going to make up $31,000, and that is on my
No, but it's made up
on my list
15,
of things to do.
Yeah,
But yes, I mean, because so as the billing schedule essentially is, in my understanding, I'm pretty sure I'm correct on this, and I think you could probably correct me if I'm wrong. The fee that the leagues charge, of that fee, whatever it's 50, 70, or whatever it is for each kid to play, I believe Paxton Recreation collects $5.
Yep.
So I mean, I think that's a pretty steep bargain, you know, and I do think there is room to increase that, as
Yeah.
well as maybe some other opportunities for some fee increases. With that said, we also still have to be cognizant of remaining competitive with the other towns in the area also.
I'll tell you, the Little League is not a moneymaker, it never has been. And it's not, I mean, Rec's extremely generous with the $5 per head, but insurance, the fee that you pay to Little League International, it's uniforms, it's 100% sponsor funded, plus, you know, they're charging the kids maybe $120 a season. You're not making any money, you know. You and I sat on the board long enough to know, that's not a moneymaker.
right.
It's more of it's just like rec. It's there to give experiences to the kids and not make money, so.
And also too, I believe, I asked Kathy a couple of weeks from about a month ago to reach out to local towns to find out what they're charging for field use. If to my recollection, Rutland charges nothing, and I don't think Spencer charges anything either to their teams.
The towns don't traditionally charge light, water, or field usage to
Yeah.
nonprofits for Little League. If you want to rent the field out, you know, it's $120 an hour or
Right.
whatever if you were a private person doing
Sure.
it, but they don't charge the Little Leagues.
Yep. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Carol?
Jeff mentioned that this year Recreation were picking up a portion of the director's insurance. Prior to my leaving as a town administrator, I called the Attorney General to see if we could actually do that, and was informed that we couldn't. So I relayed that information to Jeff, so they didn't have to pay. So what I'm saying is, he's voluntarily given up another 20,000. That's the share. For what, I don't know if you knew that number, but it's just over 20,000. I've got the number here. Plus you're saying 31, so that's 51 you're going to be taking out of your revolving fund
Yep.
additionally each year. You'll have nothing.
Not with our balance right now and the other projects that are, like
So,
I said, are required to
I know
happen.
Jeff mentioned that it was a portion of it, but I don't think he knew exact number.
So I think we've circled around this, but let me, put the exclamation point on it. We're not trying to displace the director. We're trying to find the spot where she would be paid from.
Yeah.
To continue to do the good work that the town loves and needs. So I wouldn't want anybody to hear half of what we said and think that we were trying to displace the position. I'm just trying to find the best place to fund it from.
No, I understand. I mean, but at the end of the day, to me, it's either I don't come to the town asking for money, and just like with the light, like I just had to do with the lights because it was just $80,000 we couldn't handle, or we end up absorbing the salary, and I start having to come to the town with my hands out and asking for, one-time tax increase for roofs or whatever else major thing that we have to do. We have facilities, we can't let the roofs fall down.
Yep. Good questions, good answers, good comments, good remarks.
Anything
Thank
else?
you.
Excuse me,
Jack?
the town, who pays for the electricity on the fields?
Little League. They pay for the rec pays for the lights for everything, the bandstand, the snack shack, but the big one on those lights, Little League pays for. And that's a pretty good chunk of change over here as well. That's,
But with the new lights, it will go down.
yeah. I'd say now it's probably, it's been a few years since I paid the bill, but it was thousands of dollars. Early spring and late, into the fall when you need the lights on more. Those lights are old. Those are the old gas halogen lights. They're pretty expensive to run.
Yeah.
Who,
Aren't those lights being replaced?
Yes.
That's
who's paying for that? Who's paying for the replacement of the lights?
Taxpayers did.
Yeah, that was an override.
We had an
right?
override last year for $80,000.
Those were a legitimate safety issue. They're,
Yes.
Yeah.
They're falling down.
Yeah, Paxton Light reached out to me and said these
Yeah.
need to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those, the beams are all falling down, the lights aren't on the field. It's not just dangerous for the kids playing, they're almost falling off the poles.
Yeah.
It's in rough shape.
Have you approached electric company to pay for the lights?
I'm sorry?
Have you approached the electric company to pay for the lights?
I believe the electric company is donating the labor and the service to install the lights.
Correct.
And $80,000 is gonna go towards buying
The
the
equipment.
poles and the lights themselves. So the municipal light department was gonna donate the services.
And Paxton Light regularly donates their services also for us. They're the ones that put the lights on the trees. There was a light pole at the bottom of the sledding hill that was a really big hazard. Before this winter, they came and moved that pole and put another pole in a further area to make it a safer environment. They do a lot for us, and it's greatly appreciated. Okay,
Thank you, Jeff.
thank you.
So why don't we just let that sink in for a minute before we decide what we're gonna do. I do think, though, that gonna grab anything I can. I do think that $2,500 is in the barn as a budget cut. So if you look at
This has to go away, right?
the 143 up above, we're at roughly $140,000 deficit. So now the stipends. The question becomes, we certainly can't, and I'm gonna go with the email that I got as recently as an hour and a half ago, that we can't do anything with the 1,700. Does that mean that if we can't do it to that one, we don't want to do it to the other three? Or do we just walk away from that issue entirely? And there are some select board members that would be impacted by this. There are some assessors in the room that would be impacted by this. There are candidates for a select board that would be impacted by this. So we welcome any comments that you might have. This is not focusing and targeting anything. This is looking to get a deficit down to zero, and that's why it's on the board.
I don't think the goal can be to be fair across the board, unfortunately. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, right? just because we can't do one by law, I think we still have to consider the others
Yep.
on an individual basis.
Yeah. Good point. So that would be about $12,000 if I do the simple fifth grade math and take 1,700 out of play. So that still leaves us with, if we were to, we're still at the 140 some odd $1,000 range, so if we can scroll down, Jeremy, if you don't mind.
The 95,000 is coming off of the 140, right? So that could potentially be $20,000 lower once you and Heather
Yes,
reconcile.
yes.
Okay.
Yep, I've given worst possible case. It's
Yep.
not gonna be, the 95 is not gonna be 112.
Right.
It could be $17,000 less, so. My personal concern is, and there is a particular schedule that's available on the website. We have had occasion to go to stabilization before, never at quite the number that we might be staring at. I'm going to give you my personal opinion. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, I would personally vote against an override. That doesn't mean that others can't propose it and set it in motion, but I just think that that is the wrong time for us to just wave the white flag and default to that. So I think there's still, I haven't given up hope on the Wachusett Regional School District. I think Heather's been smartly very conservative about this, but I actually have a meeting with the Audit Advisory Board in the Wachusett Regional School District tomorrow night. Maybe I can come back with some news, no news, good news, bad news, but at least I think I'll have something. And every nickel that we get from that adds to the reduction of the deficit up above.
Is that number potentially zero, or is it going to be something?
Could be 0, could be 35.
Could be 0, okay.
could be 50.
Right.
So
Heather?
It's likely to be something, right? The question is what and when.
Right.
We have no
So-
real ballpark.
Yeah, because you're looking at a couple things, right? Whether it's an E&D or whether it's just an assessment adjustment because the revenues have gone up. So if you look at the cherry sheet online, right, the House version versus the governor's version for Chapter 70 transportation for Wachusett Regional School District went up by $700,000, right? Theoretically, they could take that to heart and reduce their overall assessments by $700,000 and balance that out, spread the wealth. Question is whether or not they're confident enough to act on it at this time, or they wanted to go further through the budget process to do so. Different towns or regional districts are doing things differently. Some other regional districts jump on it, act on it as soon as the number's updated, just like our numbers were updated. We reduced our revenues because the revenues went down for us from the governor's budget to the House budget by about 3,000 and some change. You know, they might do the adjustment as well. I asked Michelle about that last week. She wasn't sure what was going to happen yet. Remember, Michelle's new and Jim's new, and they're still working the relationship with the school committee and also working very closely with DESI because of all of their financial implications. So they're not willing and ready yet to opine, but as things develop, I think that number is likely to go down. The question is when and how much.
Fair enough.
So, Jack, one second. So the two-sided comment to that is that you just said that Jim and Michelle are both new, and I've said repeatedly we're blessed by having their employment here. But the school committee is not new, and the business and finance committee is not new, and that's the group that got us in this particular mess. Number one. Number two is town administrators drew the line in the sand to have a 4% increase. What's sitting in our budget is 4.9%, so there should be, I would think, reason to have it come down. And then the other side, I don't want to sound like I'm running for office or talking out of both sides of my mouth, but Jim gave a very compelling presentation that what's in the budget isn't even enough, that we need more. But I'm all for education, but I'm also all for balancing the budget. Hopefully they'll be wise enough. I think Jim would like to keep the money in tow, but I think the school committee and the subcommittee would be wise to throw something out to the towns, having fallen asleep for 3 years and caused this particular problem literally and inexcusably themselves. I know I'm tired of that, making that stump speech, but I've seen it, felt it, and I'm gonna experience it again tomorrow night. And they just basically said, nothing to see here, move along, take the increase in the assessment that we gave you. They've showed me nothing in terms of taking ownership of the problem or showing any type of effort to cut it. That's one member's position, but that is mine, and it's been mine for 4 months or so, So, what's the wish of the group? Oh, I'm sorry, Jack.
Having been on select board for over 20 years, I think you can take the money that you have there for stipends and take it out. It's not gonna save anybody's neck in taxes or anything, so just take that money out of there.
Just say take the money
Take the money out of which?
That you're gonna pay the select board.
So you want to pay the select board or you don't want to pay
You
it?
want to run it out.
Jack
61.
said that the select board wouldn't need it, that's what he's saying.
Right,
He's been on the select board for 20 years and he never needed it, so that's what he's saying, his comments are.
So, I'm sorry, Dee, what is Jack's position, to not touch it or to take it out?
take it out.
Take it out.
6114, take it out.
That's what they're doing right now. They're taking it out of the select board and putting it in,
Free cash,
or whatever. Yep.
but you don't need it. Another question I have is, I've been going over some papers. The COA, the director, did she get a raise this year?
I can touch this one if you
I'm
want.
going to recuse myself
Sure.
from that.
So no, Jack. So what happened, I sat down with Cindy at the beginning of the budget season to look at her numbers, right? And every year on her budget, it says that she's a 30-hour-a-week employee. Unfortunately, the amount of money she was getting paid never equated to actually 30 hours. Not only that, but she was only being partly paid out of the town budget. Then she was being paid a little bit out of the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, the formula grant each year, but between the two, she never actually made 30 hours, but we always kept writing on the budget that she was a 30-hour employee. So what her and I sat down to do is we talked about how important it is for the seniors in this town to have a director that's actually working the 30 hours and have the outreach available to them, and how as important as it is, it's less important if for some reason we can't cover the administrative person to help her. So what we did was we fully funded her salary out of the budget, and we moved the administrative person that used to be there over to the Executive Office of Elder Affairs grant. So for some reason, if there's not enough money in the grant or something else comes up and she has to cut those hours, she can. But that way, we're actually providing the service to the townspeople that we've told them for years we're providing them.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Jack? Okay.
One question, Bill, for me. Is there any, are we aware if there's any regulation regarding the assessors' salaries?
So I'm not aware of any of them. The Board of Registrars one was something Lori brought up to me at her Board of Registrars meeting about 5:45 PM or so. So that's the only one that I have any recollection of, but, you know, we can always look things up. I can pop a message on the listserv to legal or any of those pieces.
So, Bill, you're speaking to this issue?
Yes, I speak to
Yep.
the elimination of committee stipends. You look at it this way. We have a hard time attracting people to anything in this town as volunteers or run for office or whatever. Those are actually meager incentives up there. In the same vein, I heard his wonderful proposal about the Recreation Committee and why it should not be touched. But in the same vein, after going through the Division of Local Services flyer, it talks about the basic roles and responsibility of the selectmen. The selectmen serve as the town chief executive body. That means they're responsible for everything in the town, basically. Other committees are somewhat one-dimensional. They have a huge scope of responsibilities of what they do, including budgets, appointments, everything you could think of. When you become the chairman of the select board, you're actually the chief executive officer of the town. So these duties and responsibilities, if you compare that to the recreation committee or some other committees, it's inconsequential. These are the people that are running your town and supporting your town. These other boards are backing them up. So I believe it's a mistake to take those stipends away because you want quality people that will take those jobs. Are the numbers big deal of money? Not much. But the incentive does have some way of attracting people. That's a way of saying, we value your service to the town. Besides, all of these people, including yourself, are employees of the town. So they should be compensated for their work. Over the years, if they had been, there was a reason for it. No sense in taking that away now, because that reason's not going away. And today, this town has grown quite a bit since I've been here, so the duties and responsibilities are more broad. And if you want to be a select person, and I assume when you become one, you want to put 100% effort into it. So a small compensation is no big deal for them or anybody else that should be getting one. So I take the opposite view. I say leave that alone. That's my take on it.
Of course, the point of the select board doing the work that they do and the responsibility that they do, I would argue that a lot of that is helped and assisted and maybe even made easier for them at the ZBA level, the planning board level, the finance committee level, the capital improvement planning level, and none of those are compensated, just to name a
Right, so
few.
that's something for another day. Once we stabilize the community, maybe there's a point that we could look into that. But right now, we really wouldn't want to get involved in that at this situation, but that could be something down the road, and something that might have been thought about in the past. So it actually, this is, although it's a deficit, it's a benefit to the community to take a look at the people that work for the community, support the community, and see what value they are, and if they minimally compensate them, it would be a good thing, in my opinion.
Okay, so,
That's just one quick word.
yep, Carol and then Dee Dee.
I'm a member of the select board. We haven't discussed this. This hasn't been brought up to us yet. I can say personally that I didn't run for the select board, the compensation. I'd be happy to give my compensation up, leave it in there and let it fall to free cash. I don't want it, but I'm going to be coming off the select board in 2 years' time, and maybe the next person wants that money. So, like I said, for me, I don't need it, and I'll leave it there. But just think about once it gets taken, it never gets put back in again. And like Bill just said, maybe that's an incentive to get people on the board. But I doubt it is for the select board. I think people run for the select board because they want to be in that position.
Yeah, I would add that most people that I know run and get appointed and try to get elected to serve. That the monetary incentive and motivation is, I ran for select board and it wasn't on my radar screen in terms of that's why I was doing it. So, Dee Dee?
I was going to address the assessor's compensation, and the only thing I really have to say about that, I don't know whether it's legal to take it or not. I'm not going to get into that. The only thing I will say on that is there are mandatory training sessions that the assessors have to take in order to be on that board. So I would think very long and hard as to whether I would have that taken out. The mandatory training sessions that you have to take and the exams that you have to pass, I've done, in the last year, I've done 5 of them. And I will tell you that each one of them has taken me a Sunday to do. So it's a long process. It's nothing that can be done, in a half hour or anything like that. There's a lot to it. So I would certainly think long and hard before I would suggest taking out the little bit of compensation that the board is giving.
Is there a cost for the classes themselves? You mean, are you just being compensated for the time? That's what we're talking about.
There's,
You wouldn't be paying out of pocket to take the class, it's just being compensated for the time, you mean?
Doesn't the budget pay for those training?
no,
You pay for it
you
personally?
don't pay for them. You just have to
Okay.
go in
Okay,
and
so
pass
there's no
them
cost.
in order to be an
Yeah,
assessor
Okay.
on the Board of Assessors.
I can back up Dee on that, in that regard. It has been difficult to get people on the Board of Assessors for the same reason, the training. It's not easy. And one particular, in the past, we've had assessors come on and then they haven't done the training, so they can't continue. It is mandatory. And I think it's after the first year they've got to have done the training, or they can't go forward, carry on. Is that correct, Dee?
Right.
So it has been difficult, that board, to get people in there.
So in summation, in order to put this to a vote, I think the three options of voting are to vote on the three, I'm holding up one, saying three, the three that are still alive, to vote on them individually, or to take a pass on voting on any of them.
Just to add to that, the three together is $12,084.
Right. So is that an immaterial?
Nope, I
Point.
just wanted to put the figure
Yep.
out there for everyone.
So-
Because the 1,700 for registrars is off the table.
So I'm going to make a motion that we take a vote to accept the motion to eliminate the $12,000 number, excluding the Board of Registers from consideration of elimination, but to consider all the other three in total. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, so we can discuss.
Is there discussion?
I would be, I guess, from my personal opinion, I would say leave it in there unless we are on the verge of an override. If we need that $12,000 to come out to prevent the override, then I would be in favor of taking that.
So to continue that discussion, would you feel the same if we had to go into the stabilization fund for $12,000 more?
I would rather go into the stabilization fund.
I would agree with Seth on that.
Okay. So the motion has been made and it's been seconded. So now I'm going to put it to a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. All opposed, say no.
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 Any abstentions? It fails unanimously. Okay. How about the Recreation Director? Is there a motion to accept either one? A motion to leave it as is, as a salary in a separate department? Or a motion could be made to move it from the general budget fund to the recreation revolving fund? Either of those motions.
I'll make a motion to leave it where it is.
Motion has been made to leave it. Is there a second?
What do you mean, leave it? Leave it here is taking it out?
Leave it in our department and not transfer it to the revolving fund.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
So how much, what percent of her salary is paid?
That's 100%. That's
But-
100.
We
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
of her total.
Recreation takes up a third of her salary and essentially a third.
Yeah, this is 100% of what's in the recreation department. I'm sorry.
She makes more money than that.
Right.
Right, but this is the portion that the
Town
recreation department's not picking up.
Correct.
And that's 2/3 of her,
Correct.
yeah. So I would again, just suggest right now, and all, and not like, what if we moved half, right, and picked up, split it 50-50 instead of 67-33? Is that, you know?
So it
in the
wouldn't be
right
half,
direction?
it wouldn't be half of that
No,
number.
no, it would
Right.
only be,
Jeff,
So
I'm
it's-
gonna put you on the spot. What do you think of that?
and, you know, I guess my point is just in terms of movement, right? It's not, you know, I certainly don't agree with moving the entire thing there, but, you know, if there's an adjustment made, you know, so maybe it's a 50-50 share.
I understand where you're coming from, and I'd probably be saying the same thing too. But my slight pushback would be that, like I've mentioned, even before this meeting, we've already agreed to pick up an additional expense in her, in picking up her healthcare too.
And just for clarification, was it a third of the healthcare or all of the
It's the
healthcare?
same, yeah. So we pick up a third of her salary and a third of her healthcare now. Thank you.
I'm trying to do the math in my head, too.
Her total compensation is
Just like some people
$61,000.
So let me
helping
see if
us
I can help here a little
Yeah,
bit. So her
exactly.
full salary for next year is $46,889. And the town has on there $31,259, and the revolving has $15,630.
And the insurance money is part of that 31.
Health insurance, retirement, and Medicare are a part of a separate number. And the separate number portion that revolving pays, that's proportional to the amount they're paying out of revolving, is $4,770. So you already see that in the revenue incoming side. So she works 33 hours a week, and 22 hours are picked up by the town, and 11 hours are picked up by rec, including the benefit portion.
So the benefits would be 12 grand total?
So I took the insurance out of play, and I had half of
About
46 is 23. So rather than 31, 23, and move 8,000 of it.
Yeah, so this is 8 instead of 30.
Right, correct. Move 8.
Mark, can I just say, Jeff isn't the full Recreation Commission,
Yeah.
so I don't think you should be putting him on the spot to make that decision, because he'd have to take it
That
back
is
to his
vote.
commission.
Yeah, and that was a friendly.
I just learned about
Yeah.
this. at
That was a
lunch.
friendly put you on the spot.
So-
It sounded like you have anything to say. I wasn't trying to spy you, Jeff, so.
Just so you know, it's not for Jeff to make that decision on his own.
Just my opinion, like just summarizing all this, is that the stabilization fund is my main target that can support a big chunk of this for this year, hopefully for this year. Hopefully with some relief from the excess and deficiency and the reconciliation process that you and Heather are gonna do at Theo's or something here soon. And, but in my opinion, if we're in this, if that coupled with the fact that we formed an economic development committee that needs to be successful, if we end up in the same spot next year and we didn't generate more revenue through the economic development committee and we're in the same spot, then I think we have to get, we're gonna have to dig into these things. I think stipends will end up going, I think. You can't do this 2 years in a row or go to an override next year when there's things on the table that are, unless we can generate. That's my opinion, but I think we have an environment for that if the, if we hit the stabilization fund this year. And again, I don't know where we are in the ARPA funds. We haven't really talked about that,
Yeah.
if we can get that.
So let me go to your point. Is there interest in withdrawing the motion? And leaving it, not acting on it?
I mean, I think what Tim said makes sense, but then do we just go to 0 instead of 8,000 at this point and reserve that for, like we did with the stipends? If we're getting down the road and we're talking about an override, then we can circle back to this, right?
Yeah, look, I think we're certainly, down to bare bones, but nobody wants to give up anything. Right. So, I guess my question, Heather, is I know, you were saying about Cherry Street, some towns just take the full adjustment, like, so, and again, so just for discussion, is conservatively, what would we, expect to see from reduction.
I think what we've talked about, my recommendation, sorry, Scott, from the beginning has been that, I think it's okay if the operating stabilization pull is a little bit higher, right? Because especially when writing the articles, if you tie it into the school budget and the school number adjusts before a town meeting, you reduce the school number and you reduce the operating and they offset each other. I think that's a lot better of a situation than trying to keep digging at different departments and hoping you don't have to go back and put money back in there later. But I don't know, right? It's really hard to tell. You can usually look at history on things, right? But to Mark's point, we have historical information because the school committee members have been the same for a number of years in school finance. But the main two players, right, the superintendent and the business admin, the ones who are making a lot of the strong recommendations and have the numbers to back it up, they haven't spoke yet because they don't have the information. We don't really know what they're going to do. We know, and I keep going back to that meeting, Mark, when was it, the end of January or the end of February? That first meeting they had where they did their budget presentation, and they were both very much in support, and I believe they still both are, of giving the money back to the towns. Now, I don't know if the school committee is necessarily 100% in support of that, but I know at least that's the push that we've been hearing from the administration. And if that's the case, I think you're going to have a lot of the towns right now, all in difficult times, especially Rutland with their massive override, right? Who are going to be leaning on the school committee saying, hey, adjust those numbers. Hey, you better be pushing that money back to the town. But otherwise, I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, it seems, so I had the privilege, or we'll just call it a privilege, I guess. I sat in on Quabbin School Committee. They did their budget presentation after the Wachusett did. And they've had a lot of issues with the towns and having questions on how the school budget was. So they actually had a member of DESE there, right? So the head of DESE is there, and he was talking about school transportation. And I can tell you in that meeting, he was talking about how the initial estimates on the cherry sheet that the governor used were based on his calculations, which were actually lower than what he believed were actually ultimately going to be funded. So I think there's enough information out there, but then again, I've been to a meeting where he actually was at and said that, the numbers are going to be higher. So when other school districts, right, like Quabbin, relied on the adjustments of the cherry sheet relative to regional transportation, they had that information. I don't know if Wachusett has that information. Now, the good news is Wachusett is working like that with DESE. So I imagine that they'll be able to get that same kind of confidence from that information, especially, like I said, with the large increase in the regional transportation numbers on the latest version of the cherry sheet.
What are those numbers there?
What are those numbers? So the number I was talking about earlier, Jack, was the approximately $700,000 increase in the regional transportation for the school on the cherry sheet. But that's, that went from the governor's numbers to the House numbers. It's still got a long way to go, as you know.
What portion is ours?
What was that?
What portion is ours?
What portion is ours? I don't know. I imagine it's probably, if you took that 700,000, divided amongst the towns, I imagine we're gonna be at least somewhere between 70 and 100,
10%.
I would guess. I don't know percent, Jack. I can find out for you. I'd have to pull out the calculations of the 5 different towns and the total numbers and
Last year.
figure out the percentage break.
9.5 to 10%.
So let's go back to the screen. I'm going to pick up on a point Tony made. If you could just scroll, I guess, down. No, up. Down so we can see up. See the one, nope, see the 143? So scrolling down, we've only reduced the green line of 2,500. So the simple math is that we're at 140,000. Can we scroll down? I would entertain a motion to balance this budget by the use of the stabilization fund for the tune of $140,000 with potential reduction of that from the Wachusett Regional School Committee, perhaps opera funds, and good accounting between the town administrator and the finance committee vice president. so that the 145 would be the most, but hopefully the 145 would become 100. And that would get us to 0 and close the deal.
So moved.
So that would be, you're gonna make no more than 145,
No more than 140,
140, okay.
yep,
Motion.
I'm sorry, it was a max of 140, we said?
yep.
Okay.
Motion was made, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Motion made, it was seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. We got a balanced budget.
So this goes,
One other piece of business under old business, if you don't mind. There's only one thing worse than a working group revising the Finance Committee bylaws, and that is to have a lawyer and an accountant have the last say. And that's kind of where we are. But a recommendation was made, you've all approved the proposed bylaws, recall that it says 9 members. And I want you to keep in mind that that would make the quorum based on the number of members constituted, not serving. So 9 are constituted, which means we would need 5 at all meetings. 7 are serving, and frankly, 5 is sometimes challenging. And you here this evening, and Jennifer, who's not with us, and Rich on a leave of absence, have been terrific about being here, way beyond and above the call of duty, but it is challenging to get the quorum. So the suggestion was, why don't we reduce the number of constituted members down from 9 to 7? In which case the quorum rather, would be 4, which is easily attainable. As it turns out, I've been on the committee for a long time. Filling 2 vacancies, on average, is going to take us about 1.5 years in order for that to happen. Now, to Tony's point, in terms of going forward, the argument could be, maybe we should have 12 members, because the more the merrier, and we need more people at the trough and better ideas, and who knows, another set of eyes. But I'm just throwing out to you to leave it at 9, which is what is before town council, or to go back to him with some revisions and reduce the 9 to 7. Lots of town committees have 7. The exception really is 9, but we've had 9 for a long time. And my point is, the question was raised to me, not my decision to make. So I'm throwing it out to the group in terms of what your thoughts are.
I think 7 makes sense in Paxton.
You think it would make sense to
I do.
reduce it down to 7?
I do, yeah. I'm open to it.
Seth?
Is there, so last week I think we had a discussion about if there's 9 serving, a quorum being 5, if there's 7 serving, a quorum being 4. Is there a way
If the 7
to,
serving, the quorum is still 5.
is there a way to change the language so that we could have up to 9 serve? But if we only have 7 appointed at the current time, 4.
That thought was raised, and I think the thud you hear in the middle of the room is how far it went when that
Yeah.
good idea
Well,
was
I
made.
don't wanna limit people if they do wanna serve,
Yeah,
but the
yeah.
experience since I've been on is the same as you, is
Yeah.
we've rarely had 9 people interested in being part of this.
But what we are trying to do is fix the situation we're in right now. So maybe the idea is, if we have a conversation with town council, if we have to go from 9 to 7, would the group be okay? Because we may not have the chance to go back and forth with a number of meetings. And the other point is, if we can get the quorum to be reduced to serving, but I think Mass General Law precludes that from being the case. Am I right, Heather, in regard to that?
So as long as there's not something specific to FinComs, I believe the language, and Jeremy and I were reading it at the last meeting, right, out loud, had to do with how it's worded. So if you say the majority of the members serving, and make that clarification, then you can operate when there's less than the natural quorum. But going back to that 7, so, looking it up, there's lots of studies out there that suggest that optimal size of a committee is actually around 5 to 7. So 7 is actually really a good number, and once you get to 9, as you imagine, and Mark, I know, realizes this with trying to get everyone in the room at the same time, it's really hard just to schedule. Jeremy was just at EDC, and we had the same conversation, right? It's a 7-member committee, and we have a heck of a time just getting 4 people to be able to show up and on point. That's after surveys and everything else. So I think you're going to do yourself a service by having a 7-member committee, right? And then if you have more people who are interested, they can always come hang out in the public and talk, and, at some point, someone's gonna say, I've been doing this a long time, and it's time for someone else to come on.
I assume if there's pressure for that, you can increase that through some process. If all of a sudden you have 20 people,
Yeah,
yeah.
we can amend the
If
amendments.
interest spikes and we're turning people away,
Right.
we can expand.
So that would be a change to the bylaw as submitted for the update?
Yes,
Yeah.
So
And-
1-1 would read, the finance committee shall consist of 7 persons.
right. It's a simple change in item 1-1. But I don't want to jam that down your throat. Seth, are you comfortable with the discussion?
I just don't want to be restrictive of people in the community.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we're.
That'd be a good problem to have. And I'd be happy to address that if we got there, so. Is there a motion to recommend to town council that we reduce it from 9 to 7? So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Heather, did I cut you off? Did you have any discussion?
No, I was good on that. I'll let you finish your motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Motion passes.
The only thing I was gonna add, Mark, is to ask you whether or not you had a chance, because I think I forwarded
You did?
this to you, so I didn't know if you had a chance to review it, because legal has reviewed it in
Yes.
precedented time, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. My first impression is I liked it more than not. I think he shrunk, where it got wordy, he said it succinctly in a shorter sentence.
Okay.
I don't think any of the concept that we wanted to have be part of the new bylaws has been changed. I just think it's a better legal brief. Gets right to the point. And I'll share that with everybody. I just got it myself today. But
Yep. So
like
I
all
can-
of you, work getting away.
So I'll, as long as if anyone has any major concerns, let me know. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll accept the changes. I'll change the 9 to 7, no problem there. Legal will see this one more time when they review the whole shebang.
Could one friendly amendment to that, could you give me 24 hours to, I basically read it quickly.
Yeah.
I'd like to study it a little more
Just let me
thoroughly.
know tomorrow.
Yep, good. Any new business? Old business? I'll remind everybody that there's a joint meeting of the Finance Committee, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, and the Select Board meeting. I know everybody's schedule is very challenging, and some of you have already let me know that you have a conflict, but just reminding you that it's on the docket for this Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank the public for your input. It was very helpful. Thank you for coming and thank you for participating. We stand adjourned.